Hello everyone! In this week's video, I'm going to be painting my original character Doris with acrylic paint on a wood canvas. I am also going to be giving tips for overcoming different kinds of art block. I'm going to try to put timestamps for all the tips about art block, that way you can easily find them. So let's get started! Once again, Arteza sent me some of their art supplies to try out. I'm super thankful they sent me art supplies to try. This time they sent me these wooden panels. They were packaged better. I removed the plastic. The wooden panels are perfect for oil painting, acrylic pouring, wood burning, watercolor designs, and mixed media. I was going to try wood burning, also known as pyrography, but I found that wood burning is very hard, so I'm painting instead. Next I have this transfer paper. Transfer paper lets you transfer your drawing onto another surface. I'll show how to use it in a little bit. Lastly, we have these metallic acrylic artist paint in jewel tones. I'm excited to see how shiny these are, so let's try swatching them. So I grabbed my sketchbook and started swatching. The colors you get are golden hour, pink tulip, rose, hot pink, sky blue, electric blue, pastel green, and amethyst purple. These paints are really shiny and they're super cool. I did notice that they aren't super opaque, but that is often the case for pearlescent paints. So I don't know much about painting on wood. I've never done it before, but it seems like many artists use gesso when painting on wood. So I just popped down a bunch of gesso and spread it all over. Pretty simple, right? Well, it would have been if my paintbrush didn't shed like crazy. It kept getting hair in the gesso and it was really annoying. My sister was listening to me rage about all of the little hairs getting stuck in the gesso. So she let me borrow one of her brushes and they didn't really shed, and that made things a lot easier. If you don't know what gesso is, I don't really know what it is either. I know it's just good to put on stuff and it makes things easier to paint. So yeah, I applied 3 to 4 coats of gesso. I can't really remember how many I did. Once I did that, I lightly sanded it to make it a bit smoother in some of the areas that it was really rough. And now we are ready to start making art. So I printed out my sketch of Doris that I drew digitally, and I'm going to use the transfer paper to transfer it to the canvas. The instructions say to put the darker side of the transfer paper on the canvas, so I looked at both sides and put the darker side onto the canvas, and then I taped it in place and put my sketch on top and taped that in place. Now I go over my sketch with a pencil. Basically, I just need to apply pressure for where I want the transfer paper to transfer. It's pretty simple, but I still managed to mess it up. So apparently there was a protective piece of parchment paper on the top sheet of transfer paper that I grabbed. The parchment paper was on the side that's for transferring. So I put the non-transfer side that looked darker on the canvas because it looked darker, and yeah, I ended up just transferring my sketch to the parchment paper. So I had to do this again. After I did it the second time, it worked perfectly. Transfer paper is kind of awesome. I wonder why I have waited so long to try it. I've always kind of made my own by rubbing graphite on the back of paper, but this works way better than my homemade stuff. So now we can start painting. Yay! I'm going to start with the background. I thought this would be a good place to start to help me get used to working with the paint. Out of all the years that I've been on YouTube, I'm kind of surprised I've never made a video on art block. I feel like everyone has talked about art block. I guess I kind of have indirectly in past videos, like when you feel like you don't want to create art or you don't like your art. So some of these tips I'll be giving may sound familiar if you've watched my older videos. I've gotten a few comments asking me to talk about overcoming art block. The thing is that art block is kind of different for everyone. Art block is basically just when an artist feels like something is blocking them from making art. So I'm going to try to give different tips for overcoming different kinds of art block. The ones I'm going to cover are not feeling inspired or not having ideas, not liking what you create, and not wanting to create art. We'll start going over those in just a moment. For the background, I had it fade from a darker blue to a lighter blue. Also, I'm using Arteza acrylic paint. I got these like 2 years ago or something. I've only used them a handful of times, so I'm still really new to acrylic painting. Now I'm trying to mix Doris's hair color. Doris has kind of a unique color and it's really hard to color match. I had to use like 5 colors or something. I still didn't get it totally right, but it's close enough. My goal today is to not fear the paint. I often tend to kind of fear the paint and I try not to make things too overly complicated because I don't want to mess up. But today I wanted to try to blend colors and embrace the painty look. So the first kind of art block we are going to talk about is not feeling inspired or not having ideas. You want to draw, but you just don't know what to draw. This often happens to me. I get my art supplies, I sit down with my sketchbook, and then stare at a blank page for a few minutes. Here are some things I do to help generate ideas. Look for inspiration in books, magazines, on Pinterest, or just around you. I often go to Pinterest just because it often suggests things that I like, so it's easy for me to find something I want to draw or that inspires me. I also have a lot of art books. I look in them sometimes to help generate ideas. I especially love my Zelda art books, they're so pretty. Sometimes I look at what's going on around me, like what clothes am I wearing, what's on TV, what's outside my window. Also, music can be really inspiring. Sometimes I listen to music when I draw and it will inspire an idea. Not having any amazing ideas? Then do some studies. When I'm not feeling super artsy or creative, I just do pose or clothing studies. It lets me draw and also improves my abilities. It's a win-win. Try different color palettes. I often get inspired from color. Like the little fire elf people you saw earlier were inspired by the group of colors I grabbed. You can find lots of color palettes online, or if you want to learn how to make your own, you can check out this video. Draw some fan art. I often forget how fun it can be to draw fan art. It can be fun to imagine a character in different clothes or situations, or just to draw them. It can also help you try out new eye shapes, different clothing, or hairstyles. Try something new. Maybe a new art supply, or try drawing something that you haven't drawn before, or maybe in a different style. Doing something new can sometimes help inspire you. So those are some ways to generate ideas. But what if you have ideas, you just don't like the way you draw those ideas? We'll talk about that in a second. So Doris's hair is pretty much done. I tried my best to add highlights and shadows by mixing different colors together. I was mixing an even lighter highlight color, but then I noticed it looked kind of like a skin tone, so I decided to use it for Doris's skin. It looked good at first, but I forgot that the paint dries a bit darker, so her skin ends up being a little darker than usual. I kept going back and forth as to whether or not I wanted to lighten it. I didn't notice it was a bit dark until after I added all the shading. So yeah, I do end up slightly lighting it later. That way I don't get rid of all of my shading. But I don't know if it helped too much. So what do we do when we have ideas but we just don't like the way we are drawing them? Or we just don't like our art at the moment? All artists, including myself, have times when we don't like our art. You may not like your art at the moment because you're actually improving. I often notice that I go in waves of liking and disliking my art. I like my art, and then I start to dislike it, and then I start improving, so I start to like it again, and then I start to dislike it again. One of the reasons you might be disliking your art more than usual is because you are improving. Your brain is starting to see what's wrong in your art. This can be frustrating, but it's also good because if you see what's wrong, you know what you need to improve on. It's hard to improve when you don't see areas that you need to improve on, but once your brain starts seeing what's wrong, it's easier because you can see what you need to improve. In the heat of the moment, you may think your art looks bad, but try taking a break and coming back with fresh eyes. Sometimes when I've been working on a drawing for a couple of hours, everything starts to become a blur and I can't tell what's good and what's bad, or I start to turn little issues into big ones, and I think the picture is going horribly. But then if I take a break, eat some food, maybe do some stretching, or play some Animal Crossing, then when I come back refreshed, I can see things more clearly. Go back to basics. If you're not liking your art or you're not able to execute certain ideas, it may be a sign you need to go back to basics and do some practicing. Like if you have illustration ideas that have characters in side view, but you have a hard time drawing side view, maybe take some time to practice drawing that view. Sometimes I'll find something tricky to draw and it's really frustrating. Like I knew how to draw it and then I kind of forgot how to. This most often happens for clothing. So I'll do some studies, watch some videos, or do whatever I need to do to help me become familiar with what I'm trying to draw. If you can't execute an idea or you don't like how the idea is going, maybe try changing the idea up a little bit. A lot of times when I start illustrations, I'll sketch out a few simple ideas very rough and quickly. I'll pick the one that I like, but then when I try to render that idea, it's just not working for some reason, and no matter how hard I try, it just doesn't look right. Sometimes I need to go back to my different rough ideas and see if any of them work for me. It's the same idea and the same concept, just drawn a little differently. Draw some art that is in your comfort zone. Maybe you don't like your art because you keep trying to draw pictures that challenge you and push you out of your comfort zone. It can be good to take a break and draw some comfort art. Like I've been kind of in a rut when it comes to drawing in my sketchbook. I kept thinking, what's the point in drawing pictures if I'm not drawing pictures that's making me improve? And the point is to have fun. Art doesn't have to be serious. Let loose and have fun. Draw tons of cute little elf people just because you want to. So I've been working on Doris's eyes, and man, they were really challenging to paint. The part that was the hardest was making the lines neat and clean, and trying to make the irises round and the same size. I had to do so much tweaking. It was also tricky because all of my green paints are slightly translucent, so to fix mistakes I kept needing to do multiple coats. In a little bit I started using Arteza acrylic markers to help clean things up. I was kind of avoiding using these because they usually dry matte, and this paint is kind of glossy, so I thought it would look out of place. But when I used them later, they blended in with the paint just fine, so yay! They were a big help with making this painting feel more finished. So let's talk about when we just don't feel like creating art. Maybe we have ideas and we feel like our art is fine, we just don't feel like creating for some reason. It's okay, you don't have to draw, take a break. When I go through times of not wanting to draw, I only draw what needs to be done for work and nothing else. I let myself take a bit of a breather, or I try to think of video ideas that require very little drawing, like looking at my old art. Whenever I do one of those, it usually means I didn't feel like drawing. Maybe do some other things you like to do, like play some video games, read a book, watch some anime, play Among Us with your siblings. I often find that if I take a break, I'll come back feeling more inspired. Make it really easy for you to draw. When I don't feel like drawing, if I have to do any work like walk downstairs to get my art supplies, or dig through my messy art bin to find what I want, I often won't draw because I already don't feel like drawing, and I especially won't if I have to do extra work to be able to draw. Recently, I organized my art bin into groups of colors. I'm always digging into all my different supplies to find similar colors, or colors that I want to go together. So I thought I'd make things easier and just group them together in my art bin. It makes things way easier and way less work, so I've actually been picking up my sketchbook more often. Set a time limit. Sometimes I find I want to draw, but I don't really feel like drawing for a long time. So I'll just set a time limit. I'll say, okay, I'm gonna sit down for 30 minutes and do some studies. Or I'm gonna sit down and do a quick 5-minute sketch. And sometimes once I sit down and start drawing, I end up drawing for longer because I already started drawing. Sometimes the hardest part is just getting started. Overall, I'm pleased with this painting of Doris. It's definitely not perfect, and the colors are kind of off, but all things considered, I think this painting turned out pretty good, and I learned a lot about acrylic paint while working on it. So after finishing the painting, I let it dry for a while, and then I sealed it with a couple layers of matte Mod Podge. This was my first time doing this, and I was nervous. I watch the YouTuber Jamie Jo do this all the time, and it turns out great for her. But you know, I have a track record of messing up simple tasks. But thankfully it turned out good. It didn't ruin the paint or anything, so yay! Also, I realized I forgot to use the metallic paint. I'm so sorry. I was excited to use it because it was so shiny. But yeah, I was so focused on the painting, it just slipped my mind. So maybe I'll have to use those shiny paints in a future video. Well, that's all for this video. I hope my tips about art block were helpful to you. We all have times where we feel like we can't make art. It's totally normal. Just try not to get too down about it and find what works best for you. Thank you so much to Arteza for sending me these art supplies, and thank you so much to my lovely patrons over on Patreon. Your support means so much to me, and I'm honored to have you as a part of the Patreon community. And thank you so much for watching this video. I'll see you all next week. Bye!